Hi, I'm Alex and welcome back to the Boathouse Paddle series where we talk about everything concerning paddle. Today we're going to have another look at MRR. Last time we had a look at how to get that number from the paddle dashboard, or more specifically from ProfitWell. But what if you want to get this programmatically? Maybe you want to display it in an admin or in a reporting dashboard, or you just want some kind of programmatic access to that number. Now, the bad news is the Paddle API doesn't have a /MRR endpoint where you can easily get that value, but there is a transactions endpoint, which gives you all of the payments made in your account for a certain period, which you can use to calculate MRR, but you'll have to calculate it manually. And I'll take you through the 3 steps that are involved in this from this data. Those 3 steps are, the first is you need to figure out what is a recurring item in the transaction. A transaction can have multiple items, these items being the paddle prices that you have. So you can have one-off charges. So you need to figure out, okay, which of those are recurring? And then you need to figure out, if you're calculating MRR, which of those are monthly or need to be converted into monthly values. If it's an annual plan, for example, only 1/12 of that would be part of your MRR. So that's step 1. Step 2 then is the transaction will give you the line item, so all of the payments made, what they belong to with the different quantities. And you will have to figure out a percentage of the total of that transaction that belong to recurring and that have been converted to the monthly equivalent. Because the transaction is done in the currency that the buyer used. So this could be any other currency but the one that you're using for payouts, for example. And the values you have there are in that currency. So to then use that percentage, you'll go to the earnings tab, for example, if you want to have your earnings, your monthly recurring earnings, or you can use just the total value there, and I will look at that in detail as well. But that will be in your payout currency. So you'll use the percentage that you've calculated with the foreign currency to then apply to your local currency and figure out the actual MRR value. It sounds a little bit complicated. It's not that hard once you've gone through it. So looking at the endpoint, the 2 things to note here is you can provide a build at parameter, which you can provide the first of the last month to the end of the last month, and you get a whole month of transactions. But if you have a lot of transactions, you'll hit the page limit, where Paddle will only give you a certain number of records back, and you'll need to use the paging features. This utilizes the after parameter. So basically you just take the ID of the last record you got from the previous time, then ask the endpoint again with the after set to that ID, and you'll continue getting the transactions for that month until none are left over. And then you have all of the transactions as one set. So the first step, as we said, was we need to figure out what is recurring. Now, the good news is the Paddle API includes a lot of the information you need to calculate that in the transaction response. So if we head to the example on the right, you can see the first thing here is this items property, which contains, for each of the line items that we'll get to later, you'll see the price object, the information for that price object rather, including the billing cycle property. And this billing cycle property will be null if it's a one-off item, so you can discard those. And it will also give you the billing cycle for annual plans. So this will be then, the interval will be a year, and then the frequency 1, or it maybe if you're doing weekly or quarterly or whatever. Using this information, you can calculate a dividing factor that you'll need to apply to this price's total amount on the transaction to get the monthly equivalent. Basically, what I would do is, for each price object, calculate that number. For non-recurring items, set it to 0. So you basically know, okay, you're going to ignore those later. For every monthly, you just leave it at 1. And for yearly, for example, you'll do divided by 12, so 1/12. So that gives you this conversion factor. Next, you'll go to the line items. The line items you can find under the details here, and the line items are here. Now, one thing to note, and this is very important, the line items is what Paddle considers the source of truth for calculations. So there are other values in this transaction object, but the line items is the one that you'll need to base or use to calculate the percentages of. Now, As I said, this line item will include the totals for this whatever price object is being paid for here, including the quantity, right? So this is not the unit totals. This is the total price for this specific price, but it will be in the currency that the buyer used. So you'll go ahead and sum up all of the line items using the conversion factor that you calculated before. You'll figure out, okay, how much of the total of this transaction is actually a factor that contributes to my monthly recurring. Then you have, let's say, 20% of the total of the whole transaction is a monthly recurring value. Then you can use that and head back up to the payout totals. Now the payout totals is, as it says here, returned in your payout currency. So this will match the total of the whole transaction, just the payout totals doesn't have a breakdown on line item level. So you already know that 20% of this transaction would be considered part of your monthly recurring revenue. But if you apply this percentage to the total of your payout totals, or if you want to, you can also apply it to the earnings, which you'll see down here as another value. Depends. If you want to just do the earnings without the paddle fee, that's probably a better representation of what your MRR is. But strictly speaking, your revenue also includes the total, including the paddle fee. Either way, it works the same way. You take the percentage, apply it to the total, and then you have, for the complete transaction, you have the contribution to the monthly recurring revenue. You do that for each of the transactions, sum them up, and you have your monthly recurring revenue number. Sounds a little bit complicated, but if you've done it once and if you've automated, it is very simple in the end. That's all for today. Thank you.